My name is Umut Korkut. I'm a professor of international politics at Glasgow Caledonian University, Glasgow School for Business and Society. And I'm also the lead coordinator for the d.Rad project. My approach to social inclusion, populism, or radicalization, de-radicalization kind of studies originate back from my interest in making people understand their shared problems. So my belief is that once people, they can get to know that their problems are not too different from each other in everyday circumstances, then they can look beyond the superficial characteristics that they were assigned into in terms of their identities. Because I believe this identity association could be problematic for people and for communities. So my approach or my interest in radicalization or de-radicalization as a person, as a human being would be rather than remaining at the receiving end, or rather than activism perhaps against certain expressions of hatred, I'm more interested in understanding why people would have these feelings, or why people would adopt a certain distaste towards the other. d.Rad is, in a way, I mean, while I'm the lead coordinator for this project, I don't want to call it as my project. It's our project. So it's a continuation of the work that the core team members have started doing around Wall Power project, looking into social inclusion, and now moving beyond social inclusion in order to understand how social inclusion can start becoming a solution to more imminent political problems. So in that sense, in my career as well, d.Rad signifies a move away from starting to understand social inclusion, the importance of joint belongingness and joint narratives, etc. And this time, perhaps tackle something a lot more imminent in terms of people's perception of security and safety in their everyday lives. Because ultimately, you can build inclusive societies, or you can fail to build inclusive societies. But what starts to come in most nations is actually not being able to build such inclusive societies is leading to an imminent threat perception in people's minds. It's a huge big consortium with 16 institutions studying 17 countries. And we also wanted to balance universities with more activist networks, more civil society organizations, because we wanted to reach out to our colleagues in the third sector. We wanted to reach out to their experiences, and we did not want to really impose as academics our priorities or our research preferences. We wanted to learn from them. And then we also built this partnership as geographically heterogeneous, because a very important element of EU projects is sharing good practice, as well as investing in junior scholars, so that they would also come to senior roles, and then teach them research practices, or share with them theory development and some conceptual improvements in the field, etc. d.Rad approaches radicalization as a process, and d.Rad tries to understand how feelings of injustice, grievance, alienation, and polarization would make people isolated from their communities, and then would make them look for extremist solutions to their everyday problems. So, as I said, we're not really looking at radicalization in essentializing terms. We're not really taking one form of radicalization against the other. We want to understand, in general, the people who look for extremist solutions towards their existing problems. How do they go through this particular journey, and how at the end of their journey they realize that they cannot really solve their existing problems within within the allocated normative systems of their societies, and how they fall out of the normative systems, and lose all trust in institutions of their polities, and hence look for extremist solutions. Firstly, detecting how extremist feelings evolve, looking into the actions of stakeholders or their historical trends. We're interested in detecting how extremist opinions come about, looking into visual media. And then we're also interested in how state positions in their legal or their policy structures could trigger extremism, rather than finding a solution. But as we progress, and this is only 1/3 of d.Rad thus far, we're also interested in building resilience. So that is an aspect of our project, because we want to use, and that's what we're going to do now in the second year, we want to use artificial intelligence as well as social psychology informed methodologies in order to build resilience in individuals, so that they wouldn't necessarily go through what we call as IGAP spectrum, which is injustice, grievance, alienation, and polarization, and then they would not really look for extremist solutions. I don't think that there's any disadvantage here, because I don't want to say the more the merrier, obviously, because there needs to be a limit to these things. But ultimately, I think that you have to achieve a certain number of countries in these projects, and I believe 15 to 20 is always a good number, in order to be able to understand the variety of problems, diverse approaches to resolving these problems, and also what is going on around the place. So that's why a very big advantage of d.Rad is what may appear otherwise a disadvantage is the geographical variety and the variety across d.Rad partners in terms of where they're coming from, and then their particular backgrounds and all that. But it's not really a haphazard or random consortium in a sense. I mean, we were looking to balance political science, that's where I'm coming from, at least, with law and legal studies, with media, as well as spatial research and geographers, all together with third sector organizations that would be more on the practice side of social inclusion. So in this sense, it's been, and it still is, and it will be a learning exercise, because as we move more towards particularly intervention and reintegration kind of work packages, perhaps that's when a variety of opinions would start to become a lot more evident in this research. Hypothetically, I believe that these feelings of injustice would really talk to various cases and issues to do with radicalization. So I presume that if a feeling of injustice would have an impact on anti-vax protesters or to extreme right or white supremacists, to similar extent. I don't want to say same extent. So the hypothesis here is that once again, the more we feel ourselves unjustly treated in our societies, the more we would look for extremist solutions. So that's one thing. The other hypothesis is that, while we talked about people's journey, as I said, we also developed certain tools of intervention in order to make people talk to each other. So the hypothesis there remains that if people, they can get to know each other in mundane settings that are beyond politicized environments, once again, then they can perhaps recognize that their problems and issues are not really that different from each other, and then hence they wouldn't really look at the other in terms of their ethnicity, sexuality, or religion, but they may understand the other person as part of the community. Now, so this pretty much relies on conviviality. So hypothetically, we presume still at least that if we can build a certain conviviality among various parts of people who may be perhaps sitting on the fence of being radicalized, we may be in a position to intervene into their life course before radicalization takes hold. Conviviality, joint belongingness, and joint narratives are very important for people to get to know each other in their particular settings, in their particular circumstances as well. And I also stated that we need to establish apolitical or depoliticized contexts in order for people to be able to approach each other, going beyond their particular identities and all that. So ultimately, we want to break this dichotomy of self and the other. So arts and sports, they provide a variety of a variety of tools for people to express themselves to each other, rather than perhaps putting their feelings in words. So perhaps with arts and sports kind of engagements, people may insinuate certain forms of feelings, but if they're put into words, I'd say they may trigger, they may unleash a more extremist reaction as well. Also, through arts and sports related activities, it's easier to build conviviality, because then you start to realize that your interests are not too different from the other person, and then based on shared interests, you start building more socially inclusive societies. Our findings will probably come to existence during the last 6 months of the project or something, because until that stage, we will be in the process of understanding what's going around, and then how we should really intervene in order to build more integrated societies. So, in order to present these findings, we will not be relying on only kind of written outputs. We also planned quite a lot of visual outputs and digital outputs in order to be able to reach out to various audiences that may be visually a lot more perceptive than textually perceptive. So I'd say that at the moment, I think it is still quite early to say how our findings are going to affect policymaking or institutionalization around radicalization, de-radicalisation. And I think at the moment it's much safer to say we're also waiting to see how the research consortium is going to evolve in order to come up with its own findings.